On the day the old cowboy died, his sons expected to inherit everything, especially his prized horse. But when the will was read, the entire town fell silent. The horse, the one he loved more than anything, was left to a woman nobody had ever seen before. No name, no explanation, just a mystery. Angry and confused, his sons saddled up and rode out, determined to find her. 3 long days across dust and doubt, chasing answers they weren't ready to hear. Because what they were about to discover wouldn't just change who owned the horse. It would change everything they thought they knew about their father. The morning of the funeral arrived wrapped in a strange, uneasy stillness. The kind that settles over a town when a man larger than life is suddenly gone. People gathered in quiet clusters, hats lowered, voices softened out of respect for the old cowboy who had once seemed unbreakable. He had lived most of his life on that land. A man of few words, but the kind that carried weight. His presence alone had been enough to command respect. To his sons, though, he had always felt distant. Not cruel, not unkind, just somewhere far beyond reach. They stood side by side near the front, their faces steady but unreadable. Grief sat quietly between them, mixed with something neither of them wanted to name. Expectation. Everyone knew what came next. The reading of the will. It was almost a formality in a place like this. Land passed down. Money divided. And the horse, the one thing their father loved more than anything else, would surely stay in the family. That horse was more than property. It was history, strength, pride. It had carried their father through storms, through years of hard work, through a life neither of them fully understood. When the lawyer stepped forward and unfolded the document, the air seemed to tighten. He read slowly, clearly. The ranch would be split between the 2 sons. The savings, divided equally. A few personal belongings given to old friends. Everything sounded exactly as expected, until it didn't. The horse, he said, would not go to either son. Instead, it had been left to a woman. A woman no one in the room recognized. For a moment, no one reacted. It was as if the words had not fully landed. Then the murmurs began. Confusion spread quickly, turning into whispers that bounced from one person to the next. Names were questioned. Faces turned. No one had an answer. The older son's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. The younger stared ahead, his thoughts racing, trying to make sense of something that felt impossible. A stranger. Their father had left his horse. To a stranger? By the time the reading ended, the room no longer felt heavy with grief. It felt charged with something else. Something unresolved. As people slowly began to leave, the brothers didn't move. They didn't speak right away either. But the decision had already formed between them without a single word. They were going to find her. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a secret. And they were done being left out of it. They left before the sun had fully risen, when the sky was still a pale gray and the air carried a quiet chill. The town slept behind them as they rode out, following a trail their father had taken countless times. Neither of them looked back. The horse was already gone. Delivered to the woman the day before, just as the will had ordered. That thought stayed with them, heavy and sharp. It felt like something had been taken, not just given away. The older brother rode slightly ahead, his posture stiff, his silence firm. Anger sat close to the surface, not loud but steady, like a fire that refused to go out. The younger brother followed beside him, his mind turning over questions he could not ignore. "Do you think he knew her long?" the younger one asked after some time, his voice quiet against the sound of hooves on dirt. The older brother did not answer at first. His eyes stayed fixed on the trail ahead. "If he did, we would have known," he said at last. But the words felt uncertain, even as he spoke them. The land stretched wide and empty around them. Dry fields gave way to patches of rough grass, then to open plains that seemed to go on without end. Fences appeared and disappeared, some broken, some standing just enough to mark old boundaries. It was the kind of land their father had understood better than people. By midday, the sun had climbed high, and the heat began to press down. They stopped near a narrow stream to let the horses drink. Neither of them spoke much as they rested. The silence was not peaceful. It carried too many thoughts. The younger brother crouched near the water, running his hand through it slowly. "Maybe there's something we missed," he said, not looking up. "Something he never told us." The older brother let out a short breath. "He didn't tell us a lot of things," he replied. "That doesn't mean there's something to find." But even as he said it, a memory passed through his mind. Their father riding alone at dusk. Long trips with no clear reason. Nights where he said little and stayed out late. At the time, it had seemed normal. Now it felt like pieces of something they had never tried to see. They rode on. By the second day, the trail grew harder to follow. The ground changed, rising and falling in uneven stretches. The wind picked up, carrying dust that clung to their clothes and skin. It made the journey feel longer than it was. That night, they made camp beneath a wide open sky. The stars were clear, scattered across the darkness in a way that made everything else feel small. The younger brother stared up at them for a long time before speaking again. "Do you remember when he tried to teach us to ride that horse?" he asked. The older brother gave a faint nod. "He said it wasn't about control," the younger continued. "He said it was about trust." A small pause followed. "I never understood what he meant." The older brother shifted slightly, poking at the fire with a stick. "Maybe he didn't explain it well," he said. "Or maybe we didn't listen," the younger replied. The words settled between them. Not harsh, not accusing. Just honest. The fire burned low as the night deepened. Sleep came slowly, filled with broken thoughts and half-formed memories. Their father's voice. The sound of hooves. The quiet spaces in between. When morning came, neither of them mentioned turning back. They were too far in now. By the third day, the land began to change again. The open plains gave way to a quieter stretch of country. There were signs of life here. A distant fence that had been repaired. Smoke rising faintly from somewhere ahead. The trail narrowed as it led them toward a small valley. Neither of them spoke as they approached. Whatever they were about to find, it was no longer just about a horse. It was about the man they thought they knew, and the truth he had left behind. They reached the valley just as the sun began to dip low, casting long shadows across the earth. The air felt different there. Quieter. Still. As if the place had been waiting for them. At the far edge of the clearing stood a small cabin. Weathered wood, a slanted roof, and a thin line of smoke rising from the chimney. It was simple, almost forgotten by the world. And tied to a wooden post just outside was the horse. Their father's horse. It stood calm and steady, its coat catching the last light of the day. There was no sign of distress. No resistance. Just a quiet presence that felt strangely at ease. Both brothers slowed to a stop. For a moment, neither of them moved. "That's him," the younger brother said under his breath. The older brother nodded once, his eyes fixed on the animal. Seeing it there, in a place that meant nothing to them, stirred something deep and unsettled. Before either of them could step forward, the cabin door creaked open. A woman stepped out. She paused when she saw them, though there was no fear in her expression. She looked at them the way someone looks at a long-expected arrival. "You made it," she said, her voice calm and even. The older brother dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with purpose. "We're not here for a visit," he said. "That horse belongs to our family." The woman's gaze shifted briefly to the horse, then back to him. "It was given to me," she replied. Her tone held no challenge. Just certainty. The younger brother stepped closer, searching her face for something familiar, something that might explain this. But there was nothing. She was a stranger in every sense. "Who are you?" he asked. She held his gaze for a moment before answering. "Someone your father trusted." The words landed heavier than expected. The older brother let out a sharp breath. "Trusted enough to give away the one thing he never let out of his sight," he said. "That doesn't make sense." The woman took a few steps forward, stopping a short distance from them. The fading light softened her features, but her eyes remained steady. "Not everything he did made sense to others," she said. "But it mattered to him." Silence followed. The younger brother looked again at the horse. It stood quietly, almost as if it recognized them, yet made no move to come closer. "Why you?" he asked again, this time more quietly. "Out of everyone, why you?" The woman drew a slow breath, her gaze drifting for a moment toward the horizon before returning to them. "Because I was there," she said. The older brother frowned. "There where?" She met his eyes without hesitation. "When it mattered most." The answer only deepened the mystery, but something in her voice made it hard to dismiss. The wind moved gently through the valley, carrying a stillness that pressed in around them. The younger brother spoke again, his voice softer now. "He never told us about you." A faint, almost sad smile touched her lips. "He didn't tell you about a lot of things," she said. That struck deeper than either of them expected. For the first time since they arrived, the older brother's certainty wavered. Not gone, but shaken. "Then start talking," he said, though his tone had lost some of its edge. "Because we rode 3 days for answers." The woman stepped aside slightly, gesturing toward the cabin. "Then you should come inside," she said. Neither of them moved right away. But they both knew the same thing. Whatever truth they were chasing, it was waiting beyond that door. The cabin was warm, lit by a soft glow from a single lamp resting on a wooden table. It smelled faintly of smoke and something simple cooking on the stove. Nothing about the place felt grand, yet everything about it felt lived in. The brothers stepped inside slowly, their eyes taking in the small details. A folded blanket on a chair. A worn pair of boots near the door. A cup left half full beside the window. Signs of a quiet life. The woman closed the door behind them and motioned for them to sit. They remained standing. "It started months ago," she said, her voice steady. "Your father came through here alone." The older brother crossed his arms. "He rode alone all the time," he said. She nodded slightly. "Yes. But not like that day." Her eyes lowered for a moment, as if recalling it clearly. "He was hurt. His horse brought him as far as it could, then stopped outside. I found him barely conscious." The younger brother shifted, his expression tightening. "Hurt how?" "He had fallen," she replied. "Badly. He could not stand, and he had lost a lot of strength by the time I got him inside." Silence filled the room as the image settled in their minds. Their father, strong and unshaken in every memory they held, reduced to something fragile. "I stayed with him," she continued. 4 days. Maybe longer. Time did not matter much then. He drifted in and out, but when he was awake, he talked. The older brother looked away, jaw clenched. "He never talked much at home," he muttered. "I know," she said gently. "He told me that too." That caught him off guard. "He said he never knew how to say things the right way," she added. That by the time he thought of the words, the moment had already passed. The younger brother sat down slowly, his eyes fixed on the floor. "What did he say?" he asked. The woman walked closer to the table, resting her hand lightly on its edge. "He spoke about his life," she said. "The choices he made. The ones he wished he had made differently." A pause followed. "And he spoke about both of you." The room felt smaller then, as if the walls themselves were listening. "He said he was proud," she continued, "even if he never showed it. He said you both became stronger men than he ever knew how to guide." The younger brother swallowed hard, his throat tightening. "And yet he left us out of this," the older brother said, though his voice had lost its sharpness. The woman shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "He did not leave you out. He just knew there were things you needed to find on your own." She turned slightly, glancing toward the door where the horse stood outside. "He loved that horse," she said. "But he also believed it was never meant to belong to anyone forever." The older brother frowned. "That does not explain why you have it." She looked back at him. "Because I stayed," she said. "Because when he could not ride, I cared for the one thing he trusted most." Her voice softened. "And because in those final days, he said loyalty mattered more than ownership." The words settled heavily between them. No argument came. No denial. Just a quiet understanding beginning to take shape. For the first time, the brothers were not standing in anger or confusion. They were standing in the truth. And it was not what they had expected. But it was real. Morning came slowly to the valley, carrying a soft light that stretched across the land and settled gently against the cabin walls. The air felt calm, almost untouched, as if the world had decided to pause for a moment. The brothers stepped outside together, the quiet following them. Neither of them had slept much, but something inside them had shifted during the night. The anger that had driven them there no longer burned the same way. In its place was something heavier, but clearer. The horse stood where it had been the evening before, calm and steady. It lifted its head slightly as they approached, its eyes watchful but not uneasy. The older brother moved closer first. He reached out slowly, placing his hand against the horse's neck. The familiar warmth beneath his palm stirred memories he had not let himself feel in years. Early mornings. Long rides. The sound of his father's voice carried by the wind. For a brief moment, it felt like standing beside him again. Then the moment passed. He stepped back. "It's yours," he said quietly, his voice no longer hard. The woman, who had come to stand in the doorway, shook her head. "No," she replied. "It was never meant to be mine." The younger brother looked between them, a faint understanding settling in his expression. "Then why leave it to you?" he asked. She stepped forward, her gaze resting on the horse. "Because I would not try to own it," she said. "Only care for it. The way he did." The words felt simple, but they carried truth neither of them could deny. The younger brother gave a small nod, his lips forming the hint of a smile that had been absent for days. "Then take care of it," he said. The woman met his eyes and returned the nod. "I will." Silence followed, but it was no longer heavy. It held something closer to peace. The brothers turned back toward their horses, preparing to leave. There was nothing more to argue, nothing left to demand. The answers they had come for had found them in ways they had not expected. As they rode out of the valley, neither spoke for a while. The path ahead felt different now. The same land stretched before them, but it no longer carried the same weight. After some time, the younger brother glanced over. "We did not really know him," he said. The older brother kept his eyes forward, but his expression softened. "No," he answered. "But maybe now we do." Behind them, the cabin grew smaller, fading into the distance. The horse remained there, standing beside the woman who had once been a stranger. But now, she was part of their father's story. And as the brothers rode on, they carried that story with them. Not as a burden, but as something finally understood. Because what remained was not what had been left behind. It was what had finally been seen. Sometimes, the things we think belong to us are never truly ours. The old cowboy's horse was more than an animal. It was trust, loyalty, and a reminder that love does not always follow the rules we expect. His sons rode for answers and found something far greater than possession. They found understanding. Stories like this remind us that life is full of surprises, and sometimes the most important lessons come from the choices of those we love. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more heartfelt tales of courage, trust, and unexpected connections. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered a secret about someone you thought you knew? Spread this story with your friends and family, and let them experience the power of loyalty, kindness, and the bonds that last a lifetime.